Hi, my name is Eryn Reece of Banzarbar here at Skurnik Wine and Spirits headquarters. We're doing a presentation called Widening the Lens. I'm here today to talk about how to incorporate esoteric spirits into your cocktail programs.
I have the pleasure today of introducing you all to Eryn Reece. Eryn is an old friend of mine. We've known each other
way back.
Yeah, for quite a young friend of mine who I've known for a long time.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
And we're going to be talking about just that. We're going to be talking about kind of like the Trojan horsing of, or the kind of sleeper cell way of introducing people to unusual ingredients. But
so we kind of wanted to talk about how to incorporate that in different ways into your cocktail programs. One of which is kind of like doing that split base thing, where you're taking like a white rum, blending it with like an Agricole, kind of in your daiquiri. So you're just kind of like getting a little bit more weird, but a little bit more still somewhat approachable, and kind of in a way that like that's able to kind of develop people's need for anise in their palates and things like that. So yeah, figured we'll show 3 different expressions where we kind of like tackle those and go from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
First drink?
Yeah, let's do the first drink. So I think the first one that's very iconic and kind of the way that I first tried to wrap my head around mezcal was the Oaxacan Old Fashioned. Before I worked at MyOL, I had a hard time working with cocktails that had tequila and mezcal in them. I was typically pretty comfortable doing the classics with like gin and rum and whiskey. It wasn't until Phil kind of started breaking it down with are you guys familiar with the Mr. Potatohead theory? If not, I think you might have been the only one that shook your head, which is cool. But essentially taking like a classic cocktail, like my favorite example is a last word. And instead of doing gin, like it's kind of another affinity to it is like Blanco tequila, and subbing that in where it's still gonna be a very delicious cocktail. It's gonna be very different, but just kind of taking something, especially with Oaxacan Old Fashioned, being that people even at that point were having a hard time even dealing with tequila.
Here, this version has actually no ingredients from Oaxaca. Here we're using this as a vehicle to, I think the profile works the same, the idea is very, very similar. We're still using the tequila and the kind of familiarity of an old-fashioned as a kind of a gateway drug to incorporating this more unusual ingredient, but the more unusual ingredient now is what's called sotol. Quite green, quite vegetal, quite grassy. One big difference also is that the sotol plant is arguably more sustainable than
my favorite part about
the agave. This is what, yeah, I know you like to bring this up.
Yeah, just because I feel like tequila and mezcal are kind of running into those hardships of like the droughts of agaves and just trying to keep it keep it going.
What happens when you have a 8 to 10 year lifespan and more demand every year? We can't keep up with that kind of scale.
Yeah, we have that at my bar. In fact, we just ran out because it's delicious and we use it a lot.
Perfect answer.
How do you use it? There's my next question.
I hadn't tried doing this because the Oaxacan Old Fashioned is a personal favorite of mine as well. So like it's super dope to taste it in that innovation. Really, really great. But we would use it for like a caipirinha, or we would just introduce people to it
that's
in a different way. Like if somebody was really into mezcal or tequila, we would just say you have to try it, and we'd give them a half ounce, and then do like a caipirinha or some kind of cocktail. Introduce it.
You can use it as a base in some of those same sort of cocktails and recipes, and let it like talk really loudly and not feel like you're masking some of the things that really give it so much of its character, because those things are really strong elements. So yeah, one way to kind of, I guess back to that first phrase, kind of Trojan horse in an ingredient that people wouldn't otherwise necessarily read on the menu and jump on. It's a way to kind of like break down that wall of resistance and get people in.
Yeah. For this next one, I definitely wanted to kind of Calvados. I feel like it's still such a hard category, even though I don't know why. I love it so much, and I feel like it should be a really easy sell. But for this one, I definitely, again, going back to whiskey, because I think whiskey tends to be a category that people are very comfortable with. So this cocktail is, again, another modern classic. This is the Gold Rush out of Milk and Honey. Usually just 2 parts bourbon to 3/4 lemon to 3/4 2-to-1 honey syrup. When you guys sell it, are there people actually asking for it because they want to do cocktails with it, or are they doing it more because they're going to go sip on it?
Honestly, I think most people are looking to cook with it first. They come in to ask for it.
Interesting.
I then tell them to just buy apple brandy instead. But
sure. Okay.
I think people that are buying it to drink are sitting,
okay.
Not mixing.
One of the other problems with like how we negotiate using these kind of Trojan horse cocktails and finding ways to or gateway cocktails, or however you want to kind of look at it, finding these ways to expose people to more unusual ingredients under the guise of a cocktail. I ran up against that with sotol and pommeau together specifically. I made a drink that was a red bitter liqueur that was referred to as a red bitter, pommeau and sotol and celery shrub. I realized that the only ingredient that people knew, the only word on that list that most people knew was celery. So the whole rest of that menu description, if you just listed it normally, would be like I don't know what this is, I'm not going to order this drink. Or we're going to have like a long conversation about it, which frankly, during service these days,
I mean, it's back and forth. Some people will come up to me and they're like, I want the weirdest thing you got. And I'm like, do you? Like, come on. You say that and then you're going to be like, I don't like it. Like, so it's back and forth. And like, I was kind of the examples I was giving earlier too is the bar that I'm currently working at, it's a bar within a bar. So the downstairs bar is more of a restaurant. And so it's a little bit more like Maker's Mark, Bullet. So more like, brands that people are like traditionally running into all the time. Whereas our bar, we wanted to have a very, very opposite conversation essentially or even just experience where you're kind of walking to the back bar and you're like, not that we want you to not know anything. We want to obviously try and have that conversation where we try and get people to try new things that they're stepping out of their comfort zone. But that being said, is kind of to go back to what you're saying, is that on our menu, we list them in a way that it's a little bit more approachable. So it can be like they can at least wrap their head around what they're getting themselves into instead of like, I can't pronounce that word.
So, for example, this Sotol and Pommeau drink, I wound up listing on the menu as just like apple, smoke, like finding words that people still had as familiar association with. And something else we've been talking a lot about that I think the first drink maybe is an example of. I think the word old-fashioned gives people like a great doorway in. People are very familiar with that idea, even if they're like, I don't know about a tequila old-fashioned, mezcal or Sotol seems a little scary. Old-fashioned is still not only familiar, but like.
They at least know they're not going to get a crushed ice drink with like a
with
flower
a parasol.
on top.
Yeah, exactly.
So they have some sort of idea of what's going on. Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes I'll use like other kinds of ingredients that I know people will kind of buy instinctively. Like let's say, this is my example I've used a couple of times now. I'll use, let's say, like I'll take an ingredient that I really want to work with as my base that I know people won't recognize, and I'll maybe pump up some of the sugars in the rest of the drink and then dry it all back out again and bring the proof up with a little bit of vodka, just like a quarter ounce or something. But then on the menu, I'll be like, vodka, comma, and then like list the rest of the ingredients. And people are like, oh, cool, I'll take the vodka drink. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you will. That's the vodka drink. But there's all these other things that I really want you to drink that are kind of supporting it, or that it is supporting. And that's another way to kind of like get someone in the door. Let's say like listing gin first when gin isn't the main ingredient. Listing.
It's my favorite trick.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sneak attack.
You ready to go to the next cocktail?
Yeah, I'll make another one.
So for this next one, I kind of wanted to have something that kind of showed a little bit of both, or two of the examples that we kind of started with. So we're doing Brennivin Aquavit, doing an equal part spread between this and like a little bit lighter gin. We're using the Rice at Bower Blue gin right now. It does have some lovely botanicals, but it's not one that's going to be super aggressive in your face. I feel like that you can at least you realize that Brennivin kind of shines through a little bit more, even though you weren't planning on getting that when you got the cocktail because it said gin first. And then also this kind of one is kind of in the vein of like a martini, and that's kind of how I describe it to people just to kind of get them thinking about it. Then again, we also do add verjus as a place instead of vermouth. So essentially it's just fresh pressed grape juice, very typical in French cooking. I feel like a few handful of bartenders in the last few years have started finding bottles of this, and it's now just again, my favorite thing. Another way to bring ABV down. So this cocktail, while still this adds a little bit of like juiciness and acidity, still kind of rings true that it still looks actually like a martini, so it's a little bit deceiving. So we're using this with
Bigelet Thyme.
Yes. Thyme liqueur, which is another one that's like a little bit goes a long way. It can be such an aggressor, but it's so delicious. So use about a half teaspoon of that. And then a little bit of the Vicario olive leaf.
I don't think we in this country really have much exposure to olive leaf liqueurs or Dragoncello Tarragon liqueurs, things like that. These are kind of flavor profiles that existed in historic Italian liquori, but kind of were mostly lost for a long time. And having an opportunity to kind of reinvestigate those instead of kind of being kind of like moving, as Eryn was saying, in the kind of more traditional framework of like, all right, cassis, framboise, like, I don't know, orange liqueur, passion fruit. I know how these things work when I have all these kind of unusual herbal flavors to play with. Suddenly I have all these extra doors being open to me. When you have something like that, I mean, like now you have a drink that kind of is modeled on a 2-ingredient cocktail, right, a martini, but you have like 5 things happening in there. Like, how are you making that still easy to execute?
I also didn't explain my bar is about 20 seats. So essentially we built a cocktail bar in a closet, which has been really fun because because we're part of a bigger establishment, we can get away with doing a little bit more outlandish things with like ingredients that people don't necessarily know about, but we also don't have much space. So we do a lot of like practice in like small batching. Because I feel like for a long time, batching cocktails got a really bad name, but that's also because I think everybody just assumed you're just batching the entire ingredients together, and that you know, that doesn't leave for like a long shelf life, nor does it leave for, you know, getting the best of that experience of that drink.
So do you think that sometimes, like, when you encounter new, unusual spirits, they give you kind of a way to rethink some of the things you've been trying to find doors for before, or old recipes you've kind of gotten settled into?
Completely. There's so many new combinations of like variations on classics we can do now that we weren't able to do.
Well, thanks guys. Thanks for coming and attending. Yeah.